In any case, this is the Kitsap Sun's editorial board. We're talking to Representative Sherry Appleton from the 23rd District and Challenger Scott Henden. What we'll do first is give you each 2 minutes to introduce yourself, tell us who you are, tell us why you want to do this, and then we'll just go into some questions and answers.
Okay.
It'll take a little less than an hour, so we're shooting.
How long do we have for intro?
2 minutes?
2 minutes, okay.
And I'll watch it quickly.
Okay, all right.
Or you want to do that? You're not in there, you're not in the line. Sherry, go ahead.
Okay. First of all, thank you for having us here today. My name is Representative Sherry Appleton. I have represented the 23rd Legislative District for the last 10 years. I'd like to return to office because I have a proven record of doing what I can for Kitsap County. I have experience, I look for solutions, and I know how to compromise without compromising my values. I am chair of Community Development, Housing, and Tribal Affairs, and then just to make it harder for me, they threw in Veterans and Tourism. So we have quite a committee. I also am on Public Safety and the Capital Budget. I also am on the Commission on Judicial Conduct, which is a committee that looks at judges when there are complaints. And it's a very good commission because we usually find that every judge is, pretty honest, but maybe 9 or 10 cases a year out of the thousands that we get, because inmates also can complain. They don't lose their civil rights. I'm on the Office of Public Defense, which is very near and dear to me because I represented the Criminal Defense Bar for 11 years. And I'm on the State Council on Aging, another very important committee to me because all of us are getting older and we're in the middle of the silver tsunami, and we really don't have the ability to take care of all the people who are now over 65. And I just
Go ahead and finish.
and I just was appointed to the Joint Veterans and Military Committee that will be meeting next week, or 2 weeks from now at Camp Murray.
Scott.
Yeah, I'm Scott Henden, running for the 23rd District, position 2. I've lived in Kitsap County for 52 years. I've been married for 30, have 4 children. I've owned and operated my business, Henden Electric, for 30 years. And it brings me a perspective. I've been involved in the community. I'm currently a member of the North Kitsap School Board, past members of Habitat for Humanity, other groups, and have supported the community in many ways. I'd like to talk about public safety. Looking at your own paper, we just had another DUI where a man was arrested. He'd killed somebody in 2007, got 27 months for that death of that lady. And then he's out again. He's drunk driving, no license. We have to begin to have severe penalties for these people that hurt and maim and kill our citizens. Drunk driving is a terrible thing, and we can't continue to let this go on. Being able to protect our citizens in ways, just looking at the paper, we just had this quick robbery here. Man was, fortunately, it's in your paper, so I'm giving you some press there, was able to defend himself and his wife because he had a handgun. But we have to begin to look at public safety. Jobs, we have a huge problem with illegals and nobody's talking about it. I'm in construction, and a weekly basis, if not a daily basis, I am seeing people out there that aren't speaking English. I don't know who is who. I'm always kind to them. I'm always cordial. It's not my place on the job to make a judgment. But as a member, we shouldn't be giving them licenses. Trucking industry is just being bombarded by people who are not American citizens. And we have to begin to say how many illegals we have. We talk about a $15 hour minimum wage, and then on the other hand, we allow cheap and illegal labor to come in and hurt the market. If you believe in the law of supply and demand, you have to accept the fact that it's hurting our economy. Those youth that graduated this year, it's going to be harder and harder. Is that 2 minutes? Okay, we'll move on. It's going to be harder and harder for them to get good quality jobs when we have the law of supply and demand that hurts them.
Okay. Scott, I'm just going to let you follow up on that thought.
Sure.
I want to maybe a little bit more specifically, when you talk about, part of this is of course a federal issue. It's not all
That's
a
true.
state thing. But the state still has people who live in here. Sherry, I think you've actually been a sponsor of things that deal with children
Yes.
who are immigrants and allowing them to be in public schools.
You mean
private
immigrants
churches,
or illegals?
illegal immigrants.
Okay, illegals,
Or
okay.
undocumented immigrants, whatever word you want to use. But tell me more specifically, what would you propose the state does to address the businesses? It sounds like what you're saying is businesses are hiring people
Yes.
who do not have Social Security and all of these sorts of things. that are set
Yes,
up for.
that's right.
What do you propose, and is that a bill you would make a priority if elected at the beginning of next session?
Well, I think that businesses are in a difficult position in that if they don't hire them, especially in some industries like sheetrock and cement and some things like that, because there's so much pressure. If they don't hire them, they're not competitive. And I've talked to somebody that would know, and what's happening is you have one person with a Social Security card, boss comes in, gives out some money, and he divvies it up. Those businesses need to be caught and punished severe enough that this isn't okay. We have to make it harder on both ends, not just on the illegal side. I don't even blame them. They're just doing what people do and looking for the best way they can in life. I don't blame them. I blame our legislatures, though, who allow them to get permanent licenses when they're here illegally, to not follow up with the businesses, not to set example, to not get out there, to not track it, to not have the numbers. To some degree, you guys could help too. I mean, wouldn't it be great if the Bremerton Sun would do an in-depth article on what is the actual data? How does it affect our jobs? How does it affect our students? So I think it's a huge issue, and I just don't hear many people talking about it. In the state of Washington, we're required to
No, go ahead.
Educate all students, and I support that. As a school board member, we do that. But on the other hand, do we have to have people coming in that are taking our jobs and driving down our wages?
What do you believe that data to be?
That data to be?
Yeah, you're
Well-
suggesting that we look into a story and say, how is this affected? What
Go-
do you
go-
think the impact is? And on the other side, if you're saying the state needs to put this at the top of the priority list, or on the priority list,
Yes.
I don't mean necessarily anything. Do we have the resources to do this in the state right now? There's a lot of competing things, of course.
My wife brought up, we had the mad cow disease, 7 years ago, and they were able to trace some cows back to Canada through the feedlot and where the feed came through. We can solve this problem. We have the technology to. It's a difficult thing when you have somebody say here 5 or 7 years. Where do you draw the line in those kind of issues? But yeah, I would encourage you guys, go out to some of these entry-level housing developments. Talk to the people if they'll talk to you. Ask them to see their things. I just think it's a huge problem. It's underreported, and people for the most part aren't looking at it, because what happens largely is you get labeled. I'm a racist because I don't like a certain group of people because. No, I just want a fair playing field. If they come here legally, if they have a right to be here, I think it's awesome. It's really discriminating against those who are trying to do it the right way. So in my business, I've had many different races. I've had Korean, Filipino, Native, Hispanic, Eastern European. I've had a mix because I thought they were the best people I could get. But they were legal. As far as I knew, every one of them had the right documentation. But at some point, we have to begin to, as a society, and some of it's a societal thing that says, no, this isn't okay. So, but yeah, I think that the state has to go out, look at businesses, look at their records, and when you catch one that is cheating, and you know they're cheating, there's got to be a penalty that's severe enough that the rest of them go, I don't want to go there.
Sherry, is this a priority?
It has been. I was chair of the Working Families Caucus for 3 years. And this came to us, and I haven't been for the last 2 years. So 5 years ago, this came to us. And what it's called in Washington State is the underground economy. And we have been really cracking down. We have legislation going after those contractors that hire illegals. And what they do when they hire the illegals, they pay them under the table. So there's not a fair competitive field. As far as illegals coming into this country, I don't think they take any of our jobs. I don't know if there are any of us who want to go pick out in the fields, pick the apples, which have to be picked by hand, and the cherries, and they're construction workers. And I think that they don't drive down wages in a way because there's more competition. They actually raise wages. And when I hear somebody say, well, they have licenses, I'm not sure what kind of license you were talking about, Scott, but I think it's driver's license. And we passed a law that, yes, illegals can get driver's license. We don't ask them if they're a citizen of the United States. But why we did it, two very good reasons. One, we wanted to know that they could read English. That was number one. And number two, when they got behind the wheel of a car, that they had insurance. And the only way we could do that would be to allow them to drive. Now, many other states did it just the opposite. They banned them. And now they're seeing the error of their ways and starting to change that, because it really is a very important thing that when you're behind the wheel, that somebody coming towards you is also somebody who understands the traffic laws.
You said there is legislation that targets businesses.
Yes, there is.
Is it working?
Well, it just got passed last year. And I have to say that I don't know if it got through the Senate, because mostly everything we did in the House got killed in the Senate. So I'm not sure about that, but we had very strong legislation, and we had many sponsors, because people understand that the underground economy is not good for Washington State. It's not good for anybody. I do want to add one thing, and when we talk about illegals, I think we should know that Canada has the greatest population of illegals who come into this country. But interesting, because they look like us and they talk like us, we don't go after them. They come right across the border and nobody checks.
Obviously, that's something that Scott is saying. This is a personal priority of mine. It's what I would want to, one thing I would want to focus on if I went down there. What about on your side? If you're back in the office that you have been, when you sit down in Olympia next January, what's the bill you would like to file?
Well, I have several, but the bill that I want to pass is, in this state, for years, we have been expunging felonies, B and C felonies. Doesn't matter how many. We've been expunging them if you've been clean for 3 to 5 years, depending on the level. You get to expunge your felonies. If you have a misdemeanor in this state, it took me almost 11 years to get legislation passed that would expunge one misdemeanor. Now, does that make sense to anybody? You've got felonies, which can be violent. They have violence with them. And yet misdemeanors, what it has done, we only expunge one, and that's the latest one, the most recent. What it has done, it has created a permanent underclass of people. Most of them are young people who, in their growing up, do a lot of stupid things. And yet we can't expunge their misdemeanors except one. So that means that every time they go in to get a job, they have to check that little box that says, I've been convicted of a crime. And they have to prove that, to an employer, that they really are an honest person. To me, this is very important, because I see kids who come into my office who can't get a college scholarship. They can't go in the service because they've committed a crime. They can't get housing because the rental owners, they get a list from the state of all those people who have been convicted of a crime. And, when I was growing up, and maybe this is generational, when I was growing up, if you did something wrong, you did your time, and then you came back into the community, hopefully a better person, and went on with your life. Nowadays, if you get a misdemeanor, even a misdemeanor, it's with you for the rest of your life. So you've actually been sentenced to a sentence for life. And so that's a permanent underclass of people that I worry about, because if they can't get a job, they can't go to school, a lot of them are functionally illiterate. How do we make them productive members of society? We have to give them a chance. And every time I hear people talk about redemption, maybe we need redemption for those people who haven't committed serious crimes, have been a little stupid in their childhood. We know now that brain function is not completely mature till 25. So those are the people I worry about a lot.
Okay. You think that's an issue?
I think it's a minor issue that we're facing. I would agree that if somebody's had a misdemeanor and it's been an extended period of time, I don't know what that is, 5 years, 6 years, 3 years. 3 years, a little bit short probably, I would think, but I could go along with saying, yeah, it's time to move on. You're employed, you're supporting yourself, you have no other offenses. Yeah, it's time to clean up the record.
Let me ask this, it's along these lines.
Mm-hmm.
The city that you live in is one of them that stood up as far as the marijuana retail shops go. And they said, we don't want these, and the reason we don't want them is because we're not getting money back into our police force. Do you agree with what the Paulsboro City Council and a lot of other city councilors are saying to the state right now, that we need the money to come to us, not be done the way that the Liquor Control Board is set it up right now?
Right, and I agree with you, David, except that we have no control over it because it was in the initiative 502, what the distribution of taxes would be.
Oh, I understand you have no control over it.
We have no control over it for 2 years. And then we can get the distribution that these cities want. But do I approve of it? No, I don't, because the citizens were very firm.
That's what I'm asking. Is
Oh,
this something
okay.
when you do have the legislation, you
Right.
have more control than I do over it?
Well, I have to wait 2 years, and
Right.
it's
Is
only
that
been a
something
year
you're
in
in favor of
November.
doing?
I think that it's going against what the people of the state voted for. It was a very strong vote, 54 or 55%. That's quite strong, and it tells you that people think there has to be something to keep a lot of young people out of jail, a lot of older people who are on meds, their pain meds. I think if the city council wanted to ban recreational marijuana, that's up to them. I don't think they should have banned medical marijuana. There are so many people who use medical marijuana, which, by the way, doesn't make you high. It has cannabinoids, which don't make you high, but attack the pain cells in your nerves. So that's my answer, David.
Well, I can see where the cities would not want to take on a responsibility without the means to support that. I mean, I didn't vote for that. I thought it was the wrong thing to do. I think it's going to be bad for kids, and I think long-term bad for society. There may be some cases in medical instances where it's going to work, but should the cities get the fund, if they're going to have the liability, yeah, they're going to have to pick up the pieces when there's people that are addictions and all of those kind of things. So I would support that. The people may have supported the initiative, or did in fact support the initiative. Was that the initiative that people would have drafted if they had had the choice? They took the best choice out there, and sometimes initiatives are a great thing, but sometimes they don't hit all the points the best they could have. And in retrospect, maybe that's one point that should have been changed.
Scott, you have some experience on the North Kitsap School Board with the education world, and that's one of the big things that's going to face the next legislative session. There's already been some money put into it to try to achieve what the McCleary decision has set out as your goals, but that's going to be a big, huge task in the year coming. Since you're committed to putting more money there, where do you see that money coming from? Where is the state going to find money to continue to put more into the schools as they're being told to? And then the other question along these lines is, what else do you think the legislature needs to do? Not just money, but what else does the legislature need to do for student success? What can you do to make the classrooms a better place, and kind of what we would be proud of in our state? We'll start with Scott.
Well, I think that local control is where these things should come in. The first thing is the more control you have locally, the more accountability, the closer they are to problems, the better they understand, the easier it is for people to get rid of non-performing citizens who, whatever their office may hold. I would first look at reducing the the mandates that we have, the things that cost the schools time and money, and we have some that are
Like what?
like what? We recently have teacher evaluations. There's a new, it's called TPAP. I think it's changed the name since they've introduced it again. But basically, some additional requirements that principals and teachers have to go through. So we're currently in negotiations with the union because they want more money. They think it's going to cost them some time, and it will, especially until the system's up and running. But this was a mandate from the state that says, okay, here, school district, we want you to do one more thing, but we're not going to pay you to do it. We have transportation issues. We've maintained about $1 million in our bus fund, who our manager does a good job of maintaining that, but there's been times we really could have used that in another area. And that's where I'm talking about, okay, let's give the schools and hold them accountable to run well, and if they don't, between the citizens and the state, there needs to be some requirements. We have a McKinney-Vento, I don't know if you heard of that ruling, where homeless is not a person without a home. Homeless may be somebody that just doesn't have a bed. Now, there's many serious cases and we should be concerned about it, but if my 17-year-old son got mad at me and said, Dad, I'm out of here, and went to live on a friend's couch, he is now homeless. McKinney-Vento said that homeless need to have access to school, which we would support, but they can move. So if a kid moves from North Kitsap to Tacoma and says, I still want to attend North Kitsap, we must pay his transportation. Now, we could give him an apartment cheaper than we could go and pick him up and take him back every day, but we can't do that. So, I mean, there's things, when I was in school, we got to have, PE was a credit for graduation, or excuse me, sports were a credit for graduation. You work harder. We've got these great wrestling programs that I've been involved, great kids, and they do far more than they do in PE. But the state has narrowed the definition so much that we can't give them credit. It's just one more little thing that it says. And to me, somebody who completes a sport activity has created a much higher level than just going through a PE class. You asked for a few examples of them. There are some quick ones that come to mind.
What about the broader question, the broader issue of how does the state funding?
Well, I think that the state needs to do a better job. The state funding is up. Because we've had a debate on the last one, Sherry says that they've cut $12 billion. Here's the Washington Policy Institute. It's from 2001 to 13. It shows their all state spending and where it's at. It's up significantly every year. Some years, last 4 years, maybe not so much, but it's still up. And we need to begin to say, what are we doing with these excess funds? I think it's up 40% or something in Representative Appleton's years here. Where has that money gone? Let's look at doing some audits. I know we've done some, but have they been effective? Have we really audited DOT? I mean, we see these goofy stuff around, and I'm just saying, I can't believe it. I can't, just in my experience, saying, why are we spending the money this way? Why do we have interchange in Tacoma that doesn't align by 6 feet and millions of dollars, and nobody says, heads are going to roll on this. We need to audit everything that we do. We need to look at priorities in government. I believe Governor Locke instituted some things that were a good start in saying, what are our priorities and how do we move forward in these areas in some kind of defined way, because there's always more spending there, as this budget shows, on good things. I won't say they're not good, but coming back to basic education, let's define it. Let's fund it first. Republicans last year wanted to fund education first, basic ed first, and Democrats wouldn't go along with that. I don't think we should use the kids as a lever. Let's fund them first, and then let's fight about the rest. What could be more reasonable than that?
What do you feel the state's doing? I mean, you're talking about priorities of government.
Yeah.
What do you feel the state does that we should?
I think right now we are at the corporate level too, but I think we have not enough people working. This is a book I'm giving out, The Little Red Hen. Everybody works. You want a piece of the bread, you plant it, you help grow it. I think there are some cases where people, for physical, mental, emotional reasons, can't work. But we have to create an expectation that everybody works. You want a piece of the state pie, you're going to work for it. You want health care, you're going to work for it. And a piece of that is helping people along the way through education and counseling and different things too. But on the other hand, I mean, am I the only person that knows somebody in family or personal level that sees people out there that are just using the system? They're just using the system. And I think it's wrong that I should work harder and expect others to work harder while they don't work. So, that's an area we look at. You know, you can look across the board. I'm in business, and maybe we'll have some business questions, and I'll talk about some of the problems I see there. But I think there's some things that we can change that are going to do better in the state, bring us more income, bring us more revenue, which will bring us more taxes, as well as looking at everything we do and saying, is this efficient? Could it be privatized? How do other states do it?
Yeah, we'll come back to that.
Okay.
Sherry, let's go back to the education question.
Yeah.
The education question is, you're looking at a year, even with the revenue projections being up, there's still a likelihood
How would
to
we
find more
fund
money.
it?
Broadly, how do you think the legislature is going to do that? How are you going to get there? And then the second part of it is any idea that you say the legislature can address this, not a funding thing necessarily,
Right,
but it
but
makes
to
it
do
better.
better. Okay, to begin with, No Child Left Behind is the basis of what is happening in our schools today, and that happens to be a federal program. A lot of states have repealed No Child Left Behind, but we haven't. McCleary is going to be heard on the 3rd of September. The judges are going to decide if we're in contempt. How I believe funds should be done is create more economic development, which is really important because that's where your taxes come from. Housing starts, which have been very slow, but we get most of our sales tax from housing starts. I think that we have to look at closing tax exemptions. We have tax exemptions on the books that go back to 1910. And I realize that tax exemptions help some business, compete in the global economy. But there are some that are just not worth it, or they haven't disclosed that they're making family wage jobs.
Give us some examples. When you look at that list, what do you say? Boy, that is
Well,
not helpful.
Everybody always uses the example of bull semen. And maybe
But that's teeny.
Of course
I mean,
it's
it is.
teeny. I myself, I was one of 12 people who voted against the Boeing tax exemption. Because when we're under court order to fund education, we're giving $9.8 billion to Boeing. I think Boeing should take it upon themselves to give back $1 billion or $2 billion. They're the ones who are pushing greater education, and granted they should because they're hiring in this state. But I also think if they gave back $2 billion, we might be able to fund McCleary a lot better and still do the same thing. We're not talking about doing away with it completely. Also, well, I did that. Okay. 88% of the schools, the report came out yesterday from Superintendent Dorn, 88% of the schools in this state are doing a good job. But because they don't meet the evaluation of the federal government, those particular goals, they are failing schools. And I think I read something out of the 220 school districts, there was a small number that actually passed. And so what are we doing? We're telling we're telling parents that their children are failing in school. And it's just not right. The waiver we lost because on the floor of the House, we refused to pass something for the budget. We refused to pass the evaluation. And the reason for that was, and for me, it's a personal thing, I believe that no child can learn if they go home to a dysfunctional family. I think no child can learn if they are homeless, or if they're hungry, or they don't have a roof over their heads. That is our responsibility. But what happens if they can't learn, it reflects on the teacher. Well, the teachers don't go home with the kids. Neither do the principals. And to me, if you're going to evaluate, you should be evaluating teachers, principals, parents. Then I would vote for that. But until that happens, I won't, because I think it's unfair to teachers to do that. Did I miss anything? I've been writing down as quickly.
No, that's fine. No, we're just here. Okay.
I do want to address one thing.
Go ahead.
About the costs rising and we're putting more money.
Mm-hmm.
That's because of the rate of inflation. And for no other reason. Every time you look at the budget every year, you're going to see it go up because of the rate of inflation. The money is not worth what it was the year before.
True, we have more people in the state too.
Right.
The other thing, kind of what Scott was getting a chance to talk about is when you look at the priorities of our state, because some money gets moved around, this is how this works. Do you see things that you say, we're spending too much over here, we shouldn't be in this business, we can spend it more effectively over here?
Well, if we hadn't cut $12 billion out of the budget over since 2008, I would say yes, there could be. We still are looking for programs that don't work. None of us want to fund a program that doesn't work. But I think it's very hard to say you're going to rob Peter to pay Paul. Somebody gets hurt. And right now, as we are doing education, and there are people who say we have to do education first, put the money in, what do we do about children, the elderly, the developmentally disabled? Who's going to take care of those people who can't take care of themselves, who have no voice? And so I consider that part of my responsibility, to make sure that if we cut something, we're not hurting a group of people.
One of the things we're kind of dancing around right now is, what's that?
Oh, I want to know what we're dancing.
Oh, I feel, well, I'm sorry, I don't mean to say it that way, but we were talking about tax loopholes, programs that need to be audited, whatever else. The other way to get money, of course, is a tax. You're
Right.
putting signs up that say no income tax, so I understand how you feel about that. First of all, is anyone saying there will be an income tax? Is that something your opponent is not?
No, because
I believe. But are there things in our state's tax, and I want to ask Scott just why you're putting that sign up too, give you a chance to say that. Are there things in our tax structure that you think could be done betterly? Could we do this state, run things in a different way that you would be comfortable with going and talking to people, and that could mean transportation is another one of those big ones,
good, yes.
gas tax or something like that to fund this. What's your opinion on how our state collects taxes right now? Is it the right way to do it? Are there other things that you would consider?
Well, first of all, I think it's the wrong way to do it. We are nickel and diming people to death because we have no continuous dedicated stream of money. Do I believe in an income tax? I think I've told you this many times, David. I do. Do I think there's going to be an income tax in this state? No. You've got to get a 2/3 vote of the House, a 2/3 vote of the Senate, just to put it on the ballot, and then a 2/3 vote of the people to make it happen. And it's not going to happen. But I believe it's probably the fairest form of taxation. What do I think would be really acceptable? I think seeing, when we had that income tax initiative a few years ago, Bill Gates Sr. for the high wage earners, what he never said, and it was kind of sad, is that 335,000 businesses in Washington State would never have to pay B&O tax again. And B&O tax is the most regressive tax, especially for business startups, because you're taxing gross receipts, not net. He also should have said that it would take the state's portion of the property tax and do away with that. And it would have the sales tax. Now, I could live with a tax reform package that did that, and even though it's called state income tax, I think it's called fund schools, fund corrections, fund social services, do all that with we know how much money is coming in. And that's so much better than watching a sales tax go like this every time we hit a recession and that. So I don't know why he's putting that up on his signs, because I've never said it would happen.
Tell us why you're putting that on your signs, and then
Well-
do that first. Yeah.
Representative Appleton has repeatedly over the years said that she would vote for a sales tax, and I appreciate her saying that.
Income tax.
Income tax.
Excuse me, income tax. And the reality is, they may not be doing it now. I believe it's part of the Democratic platform, isn't it? That there would be a state sales tax, or a state income tax, I'm saying that again. So, I mean, to say it's not an issue right now, it's gonna happen in the next 3 months, but they're pushing that direction. If they can get a chance, they will. And fundamentally, does any tax ever go away? I'm sure it'll start, it's just a little piece, it's all gonna be fair, it'll be low, it'll be all of these things, but the reality is, they don't end up like that. I mean, the federal income tax, it was supposed to be 1% and tax the wealthiest, you know, and all that other stuff. Well, the reality is, many of us pay it now. And so I think it is an issue, and I think it's a statement she's made clearly. I think it's something that she would do if she had a chance. It was in some of the other forums, I think in the 35th forum, it came up that it was an issue there. So yeah, is it gonna happen tomorrow? No, but that's only because they can't make it happen.
So how does the state become more stable?
Well, how does the state become more stable? We become more stable by providing business an opportunity to do well here, to have reasonable regulations, to have people that come in and can find good jobs because we have the right kind of work. And I think that's where it ends up. When people can work, when business have good regulations, you know, whether it's right or not for Boeing, I hate to see anybody get that. But a lot of times when we see these breaks, they're for roads. They're not a gift of money, they're maybe a tax deferment. The reality is we have a national economy, we have a international economy, and if we don't compete on that basis, we lose. I heard the EDC director in Kitsap County about 5 years ago calling the rest of the county's dogs because they're having policies that really encourage business aggressively. Call them dogs, and I'd say, let us become one of them dogs. Let us become the state that says, it's not that we don't have regulations, it's not that we don't have expectations. They're going to be fair, they're going to be consistent, we're not going to tell you one thing. Just worked with a business, maybe a year ago. He's coming in from California, he has 20 employees, 20, 30. And I'm in the Department of Labor, I do electrical work, so the requirements are making him bring old equipment up to current standards. A lot of the time the equipment was never registered or labeled the way the department would like, so he's spending tens of thousands of dollars. Had another guy that's got a business, I don't want to say who it is, but he said, you know, Scott, I like your work, I'd love to have you do your work, but you can't get electrical permits because it's too costly to bring this old equipment up. And a lot of times, apparently, the old equipment is better. It's made better, and for some uses, it just does a good job. But what would happen is my work would be correct, and the inspector could go in there and say, maybe it was listed, or maybe it's engineered, obviously, at some point, but it's 40 years old, so now he's got to have an engineer come in. They were just a little piece of saying, let's get state out of the business of regulating every little detail, and at some point, trusted insurance companies and businesses have the savvy to do that. Waiting for permits. This last year, I had a house that waited for a week to get an electrical inspection. Used to be pretty good, but waited a week. So he has to back up the sheetrock, back up the insulation. It stops this whole process because the Department of Labor is under funded in that area and can't seem to figure out, we have the permit fees, let's move forward. But at the same time, I am getting carded by a temporary and compliance officer in Port Orchard because I got my van and name out in front on Front Street, and he comes in, which is okay, you know, we have our licenses and stuff. But the problem is, while he's checking me, we don't have inspectors out there taking care of the work, getting business on, so that they can continue, so that they have flow.
So where do we get that money to come from then? And I don't want my question to be taken as we always have to tax someone else to get this stuff, but at a certain point it is that way. We're saying we don't want to pay over here, but you're saying the office isn't funded properly to get the job done. We need to get these jobs done. It's, you know.
Well, we pay permit fees that pay for the department's operating, so it's not a matter of it's the fees there, it's the structure. The structure is broken that allows the Department of Labor to say, you know, work fees are up, inspections are up, let's hire the people we need to get the job done. So to me, that's a pretty basic problem. If the legislature has laws that impede that, then we need to change them. If we have directors that are not moving forward, we need to remove them. But this is a case to me of the state needlessly getting in the way of business and thriving business to do what it needs to do, and that's, you know, make things happen in our economy, build houses, make products that we can sell.
What about what Sherry suggested as far as that Bill Gates initiative? If there's kind of a trade-off that says we don't charge B&O tax anymore, and it goes on the backs of people who make $1 million a year, is that, whatever it would be, I'm
Yeah.
hypothetical.
Well, I think that when people make $1 million a year, hopefully they spend a large portion of that million, and it becomes sales tax in our state. I think about 50% of our state revenue is sales tax. We have property tax. Hopefully the millionaires have businesses and home properties that are being taxed, so that we're getting property tax from the state and for local government. Do I have a soft spot for billionaires that are making $10 million for running some corporation someplace? No, I really don't. But at the same time, if that's what the market drives, and it'll support, and I guess that's what it is, I think that they should pay a fair percentage like everyone should with a dropout point. I mean, our income tax, I'd love a flat tax at the national level. I know that's not what we're talking about. You pay a flat tax, it's on a postcard, and with a dropout level of, I don't know, 30,000 or something, or you could argue about that number, but those who make a lot of money should pay a percentage of it like the rest of us.
Stay on this, slightly on this topic, but in regards to transportation, there's some real transportation needs. This is something that's going to be on the agenda for the next legislature. The gas tax been talked about. There's other ways to charge fees, charge tolls, toll roads, things like that, so we can start putting some money into those projects. How do you think the two sides are going to come together and try to come up with a solution, and what would your role in that be? What do you bring to that discussion if you're there next session? We'll start with Scott.
Sure. Well, in all of these things, as a candidate, I try to bring complex things down to 5 words so that we can get it out to the public. And you can't always do that. And all these things, when I've spoken, I realize they're not that simple. It's a little conversation here. But is DOT doing a good job of using our money? When they built the interchange down there that was 6 feet off, who paid? What was the penalty? Were any companies that you're barred from bidding on state transportation projects? Who is the engineers that approved it? We have to make them accountable for their actions. We talked about the Gore bypass. If you've been in Kitsap County, at one point we talked about bridging across there, would have saved millions and millions of gallons of gas, but because of politics got in the way, we did the bypass, and we've suffered with it for years. We have to stop making those kind of decisions. Outside of my house the other day, I live near a state road, there were 3 guys washing a speed limit sign. Guy had a clipboard, guy had a wand spraying it, and the guy had a brush. Big Ford F-850 truck. And I'm thinking, this is absolutely crazy. I think that we continue to do things based on politics, based on a lot of things. I mean, even our union wages that we pay. Do we have to pay 50% or 100% more to get qualified workers? Am I going to change that as a legislator? It's a national issue, probably not, but it bugs me. It bugs me with the schools that we spend that much money to support a certain class of workers based on so-called prevailing wages, which it's not. But looking at the gas tax, we do have a problem where our local tribes are taking off 27 cents a gallon. They're supposed to use it on their own infrastructure. There's no way to account for it. They have their own set of books. They're getting money not from their own tribal members, but from people passing on the road. How many $1 million are we losing a year through tribal interest because they're not paying the gas tax? Besides the fact, now a store that has to compete with them has to pay property tax on that and doesn't get the gas tax in return. It's like, how are they not taking over the state? So, you want to talk about roads, let's audit the department. Let's have a leader that is committed to being efficient. Let's have road solutions that are not political solutions, that aren't stupid, that don't pass the test of saying, gee, this makes no sense. Representative Appleton's been here long enough in Paulsville there. Oh, it's probably been 12 years ago. They built a bridge, wasn't wide enough for 4 lanes. They knew 4 lanes were coming, but it lasted like 4 years, and then they tore it down and rebuilt one. But they didn't have enough money to finish one. And it's like, this is insane. Really, we built a 2-lane bridge, knowing that a 4 lane's coming pretty soon, and we do that, build it, tear it down, and how much waste is that? And we have to start looking at that and say, no, we're not doing that anymore.
Sherry,
Okay.
how do you think they're going to do?
The transportation revenue package I don't know whether you're all aware that the House of Representatives passed that transportation package 3 times. The Senate refused to even look at it. Part of that was something that was very near and dear to the legislators in the 23rd, 35th, and 26th, and that was the fact that it funded 12 years of ferries, both operating and capital to build. It was very important to this district. And when the Senate refused to do it, I don't know that we would do it again if we can't get them to understand that it's not just about ferries, it's about roads, it's about commerce, it's about, not having a ferry break down if there are trucks loaded on the ferry to bring produce over here. I mean, there are just so many things.
What do you think?
Wait.
What you said, it sounds like you were happy with what the House came up with then. Is that
Yes,
something you voted for?
absolutely. I thought it was the right thing to do.
What do you feel it was that was stopping it in the Senate? And is there a way to change that so that they say, we go along with this too?
Well,
What are you willing to do to commit?
I think the word tax is what stopped the package. The 18th Amendment to the Constitution is that all taxes from roads and that go back into roads. And the car ferries, because they're part of our marine highway. But the problem is that the gas tax is no longer viable. People are driving Priuses and hybrids and all that. They can go up to 80 miles without having a gallon, without having to refill. So we're going to have to look at different areas to figure out how we can fund roads, how we can fund ferries. Part of that is user fees. The department is looking into now putting sensors in the roads maybe, and those people who use the roads will be taxed. Those who don't use the roads won't. I have a problem with these lanes that people can pay a fee and drive in these fast lanes. Of course, that leaves low-income people behind. And I don't think that's fair in a sense, because those people need to get to work, and we are just driving them out. And I want to talk about, just really fast, about the gas tax compact with the tribe. Taxes are federal. With Indian tribes, they're sovereign nations, and they don't have to do anything to give us taxes. But if you look at the Suquamish tribe, last year they gave $658,000 to nonprofits throughout the county, not just in the 23rd. But the compact, the gas compact, was something we worked very hard on, and we got the tribes to agree to give the state 25 cents on the dollar. They owed us nothing, but they gave us 25 cents on the dollar, and that other 75 cents only goes to transportation projects with the county or city involved on the reservation and off. So it's not money that's being skimmed off or used for other purposes. I mean, this was a compact that the tribe signed with the state, and there's only one tribe that has not done that. Well, they did, then they recanted, and that was the
Where does
Yakima.
each dollar, 25 cents of a dollar goes to the state?
Right,
And then
and 75
cents
cents
to local
goes back to the
municipalities.
tribe.
Where does that dollar come from?
When you buy gas. If you buy gas.
If I buy $20 worth of gas,
on the
$1 gets
reservation,
split that way on
right.
the reservation.
It's not off the
It's
reservation.
27
the
cents a
same.
gallon, isn't it, of the normal gas tax? 27 cents a gallon?
No, it's
is that-
25.
Okay, 25.
25 of the
All
normal
right.
gas.
But it doesn't matter. The fact is that they negotiated in good faith. They didn't have to give us, the state, anything, and they did. And that really works for us in a lot of ways.
Ferries have been the big thing in the news, and everyone's, I think you got interviewed for the story, and
Yeah.
everyone's shaking their fist on what we're going to do about this thing. What do you do when you go to Olympia next spring? What's the first thing? What are the first steps that need to start going to get the public faith restored in our ferry system?
Well, I think what we need to do first is pass that transportation revenue package. Because if we don't have any funds, and that's what's happened, we have let the ferries, the maintenance of ferries, languish in a lot of ways. We are not fixing roads. We are not doing the things that we need to do. So before we can actually fix the situation, we need to have a transportation revenue package, The second thing we need to do, or we need to do it actually before the session, is find a director of the Washington State Ferries. Somebody who is strong, is a leader, who understands not only business, but the ferry culture, which is very different from all other forms of business. So we need a strong leader, and I'm hoping that Secretary Peterson is looking for that person, because it's been a disaster. I mean, when the Tacoma broke down and the Calf Lamet.
Do you think the salary's high enough to attract the right person?
Probably not. I looked at the salary, it was like 119,000 to 100 and something. Yeah. I think if you're going to get the best of the best, you got to pay for the best of the best. Somebody who has a proven track record. And there aren't that many ferry systems in the world. So you have to look at a unique group of people. But that's, for me, what needs to be done. We need to fund those ferries.
Scott, if you were down in Olympia, how would you try to attack that problem?
Yeah, can I back up just for real quick on the Senate refusing to pass a measure? It's not just taxes, it's taxes and reform. I think the Senate would have went along with that. But let's not forget, the Democrats have controlled the state for 20 years. They've had the governorship. Many years, probably at least half, they've had both houses and the state. Prior to the previous 2 years, they had both houses and the state. I think it's inappropriate to blame somebody else when you've been there for 10 years and haven't made the changes.
Let me ask you a yes or no question on that. If you were to vote on that with the tax in it and certain reforms, would you be willing to go along with it?
I could probably, if there are some good reforms and some absolute things, but it concerns me that you vote for it and then it all washes away. But I don't like it. I could maybe accept something along that if there was true reform. Ferries.
Can I ask a question?
Go ahead.
We keep hearing people say true reform. What does that mean?
What does that mean to you? What would you
Well,
like
to me,
do you feel there was reform in that?
I think that, reform I think of in other areas than transportation. We have had a terrific audit of the ferry system, the Department of Transportation. We know what needs to be fixed. I don't know that you call that reform. Reform to me is changing something completely. And I don't know how you pour a road differently or, do maintenance on a ferry differently. I mean, those are not reforms. And by the way, they're not Democrat or Republican. They're people issues. And that's what we do when we go to Olympia. We do people issues.
Well, I think the Republicans did present, we had some in here last year into our board who were on that transportation committee, and they suggested some of the things. So there were ideas. Were there any of those, anything that you've heard that you said, yeah, we could include that? I'd be willing to talk about that.
Well, they took out most of the funding, and they took out the funding for the ferries. And I'm not voting for anything that doesn't include the ferries, because I represent a ferry district. And you have to, do what's right for your district. And funding ferries is really an important thing.
That was your question. Ferries.
Well, I guess I do believe in true reform. And when I say true reform, I mean reform that actually changes things, that it's not a headline, that it's not a splash, that it has some teeth to it, that has some legislation to it, where those reforms actually change. If you look at the price we paid for the ferries, we paid nearly double what we could have got it. Now, do I want to build in state? Absolutely. I love that idea. Not at twice the price. If we don't have local contractors, if we don't have the unionized force that's willing to say we're accept wages that are competitive, then we need to go out of state. But to me, spending twice. And then, you know, we've got some of these things like these ferries that list. Really? We designed ferries that listed from the start, and we're going to fix it later? That's okay? I mean, how can that be okay? I have some concerns about ferries. Some of our island runs, Vashon and the islands are really expensive. Kingston and Bainbridge actually do pretty good. They pretty much pay their way. Maybe not exactly, but they're in the mark because they have well-used runs that are short enough to make it worthwhile. Bremerton's a dog. I mean, it just loses a lot of money. Should we begin to look at saying we're not going to over-subsidize some runs and we're going to give money equally to the rider, let the dollars go with the rider or something, where if you're on Bainbridge you're paying less? I wouldn't have a problem with that. I mean, does Vashon need 3 points of contact with ferries? To some degree, at some point, if you choose to live on Vashon or southward or Vashon or one of the islands or something like that, maybe you should expect to pay more. I mean, it's just kind of the way it is. I don't know. It's not easy answers, but I think they do start with saying, are they well run? I mean, in the last 15 years, has a ferry audit came out well, where they said, yeah, you're doing right? I mean, it seems like every one of them, they can't control who's taking tickets, is all the money getting in the register, how the ferries are built, who pays for them. I have some concerns there, and I think they should be addressed. I think more money isn't just the only answer here.
We're kind of reaching the end of our hour here, so we're gonna